guys come on up, all right? When they said fireside chat, they weren't kidding. This is going to be the most intimate thing in the world. So literally, if you all have questions, we don't have to worry about mics. Walk up on stage. You can whisper it and grab a seat. Here's what I'll tell you. He's coming. He's texting. Come on, he's busy. You can tell company founders they never get off the phone. But honestly, you got a chance to talk with 3 company founders, 3 CEOs at different stages of a startup's life. At other conferences, this would be a main stage type event, the type of speakers. I mean, these are folks, I'm going to brag on them. These are, go to Forbes. You'll see articles written about them, okay? Entrepreneur Magazine, Wall Street Journal, you take your pick. These are very successful founders that have done that. Go to Forbes, you won't find me anywhere. However, if you go to Apple iTunes, you'll find me all over the damn place because our podcast is absolutely awesome. And I will literally give my podcast a shout out like 50 times while I'm up here and I'm wearing the merch. So that works too. All right.
That's what they call a shameless plug.
No, I'm going to come on. I will plug like there is no shame in plugging when it's yours. That's just how life works. We're at a John Hope Bryant conference, all right? Do you not know John? Lord. John's a good friend. I love John. I've known him for a couple of years. And how many of y'all were at the event last night? So you basically went to church last night with John? Right. We'll replicate that here while we're doing this. So here's what's interesting with the 3 founders that we have. And I'm going to let them talk more than me. They're at interesting stages of a company's life and also who they target. And I'm going to let them introduce their companies and talk about what they do. But essentially, we've got Sheena working with folks that I would call underbanked, underserved. Then we've got Andre working with how you do better banking. And then we got Chris with, all right, now you're making money. How do you actually safeguard that? How do you invest and how do you take it? All at different stages. We'll talk a little bit about how many customers they have and how they go through customer acquisition. But what I'd like to start with is give each of them a chance to introduce themselves and talk about the company that they founded. So we'll start with Sheena.
Good morning. My name is Sheena Allen. I'm the CEO and founder of Capway. And my company, we are a neobank. We're actually more of a full financial ecosystem where our job is we're bridging the gap between the financially underserved market, mainly millennials and Generation Z, to the cashless economy. And so whereas I grew up in a really small town in Mississippi where my great-grandmother kept her money in her house, not at a bank, she didn't trust the banks. Our generation can't do that. We can't pay for Spotify in cash. We can't pay for Uber in cash. We are definitely in a cashless society. So regardless of being in a rural area, a banking desert, or inner city where you can't really afford your traditional banks, our job at Capway is bridging that gap and providing that financial ecosystem to the cashless economy for the underserved.
All right, Andre?
Hi, everybody. Folks in the back, can you hear me? If I need to talk louder, just
yeah, we'll raise the volume.
Raise your hand. No, I very much appreciate all of you who are here. Scarcity breeds real appreciation. But I'm glad to be up here with all these folks and with all of you. Aspiration is something we call and think of as having created the category of socially conscious, sustainable retail banking. Set of words that don't necessarily go together in years past. But what we've really done is say, how can you, as we call it, do well and do good at the same time? And so our core product is our Aspiration Spend and Save account, $10 minimum deposit to open an account, but you get 2% interest, so 200 times the higher interest than people would be getting from the big banks. Cashback rewards as you're spending with your Aspiration debit card, not just what you usually get the cash back on a credit card. And so trying to put a great financial product in the hands of everyday folks, but also one that helps you make the world a better place. So your deposit can be fossil fuel free as opposed to traditional banks that are taking literally $500 billion of their customers' deposits and investing it in the very things that are killing our planet, or investing it in large gun manufacturers and so on. We had something called the Aspiration Impact Measurement. It allows you to see your own personal sustainability score. So you can see how the businesses where you're shopping and spending your money treat people and the planet. So I'm going to decide to go have lunch at McDonald's or Burger King or Taco Bell or Chipotle or anything else. I can see how do those places treat their employees? How do they treat the environment? And make spending decisions based on that. And then we give extra rewards around that. She was talking about people can't afford banking. For us, no fees whatsoever. No overdraft fees, no monthly fees, no ATM fees. You can use any ATM in the world. We'll reimburse you. We have something called Pay What Is Fair. Customer decides what to pay us. If you want to pay us zero, you can pay us zero. Get treated the same as any other customer. It's up to us to earn that fee. You pick the fee. You can change it whenever you want, as often as you want. And vast majority of customers choose to pay, which for us means we have to make our customers so happy, so wowed, so successful, so delighted with what we're doing that they choose to pay a fee to their bank account, even though they could be paying zero. And then we give 10% of what we earn towards charitable giving. So really trying to create this institution that is one that helps people have not just more money in their pocket, but also more power to do good in the world, which is, I think, what people are ultimately looking for, especially the folks who are coming to a place like Aspiration. And we're now about 4 years, a little over 4 years since we first launched. Growing fast, adding about 200,000 new customers a month. So really people getting excited about a different way to spend, save, invest, give, and bank for the future.
Chris?
Hey. Thanks for being here. My name is Chris Hutchins. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Grove. And I'll talk a little about the problem set that we really care about. So I started looking across the ecosystem at all of these products that were helping people figure out how to get started, how to start getting banked. And once someone is able to save up and pay off their credit card debt and start to put aside some money, we realize that people come into this really stressful situation of like, where does it go? Do I use it to pay down student loans? Do I use it to save for my retirement? Do I use it to fund my children's education? Like, how do I even start to figure this out? And every different account that you could possibly open has a different random name, like an IRA, a 401k, a 529. People just are lost. And then if you look at the products in the market, it's lots of things to help you get started, and then pause. And then once you've got $1 million, there's so many people that want to come up to you and say, hey, let me help you manage that $1 million. But when you don't have $1 million, the vast majority of financial advisors are not interested in helping you. It turns out 9 out of 10 financial advisors in the US are not what's called a sole fiduciary, meaning they have no legal obligation to act in your best interest at all times, which to me was crazy. Like, imagine if that was in medicine and your doctor could be like, well, this pill will help you, but this other pill will make me money and may or may not help you, and that's what's legal in the financial industry.
Imagine.
Yeah, imagine.
In quotes.
No one here's a pharma rep, right?
Yeah.
And so it just drove me nuts that was like a legal thing. And so if you don't have your $1 million and a wealth manager is not there to help out, your option is to let someone sell you a life insurance policy you don't need or a mutual fund you don't need. And so I looked for a while at how the whole industry operates and what people are doing, and came to the conclusion that because the industry has been so old and the software hasn't evolved, most of the way financial advisors work with their clients is through people literally printing out their bank statements, and they use some old software and they print out financial reports and they put them in expensive fancy binders. And so we decided that we were going to build technology to replace a lot of that mundane work. And so the traditional financial advisor spends 80% of their time not working with clients and doing other things. And we wanted to get rid of the 80% so we could bring the cost of working with a financial advisor down from thousands or tens of thousands of dollars a year to hundreds of dollars a year. And so we launched an online financial planning service where we have a team of certified financial planners who are all held to that fiduciary standard to act in our clients' best interests. We make all of our money from our clients, and we don't recommend products that aren't good for them. And so we spend time getting to know them, helping them understand and figure out how to change behaviors to align with their goals. When you look at what financial independence means to anyone, it's totally different. And so people can't compare themselves to their friends, their parents, And so we take the time to actually get to know what's important to them, and we find that once you can connect with a person's emotions, which is why we use real human financial advisors, you can actually change their behavior. So we see about 90% of our clients start making financial decisions to improve their financial lives within the first month of working with us. We have really high customer satisfaction, and people actually are changing and starting to put towards what they care about. And until you figure out whether you're on track for the goals you care about, it's really hard to even figure out what to start doing. So we've been around about 3 years, work with hundreds of people. We do charge money.
It's okay to make
It's so
money.
scary in Silicon Valley. Everyone's like, oh my God, you're charging money. How could you do that?
Yeah. You can tell he was a former VC, by the way, for anybody that says that. And I'm Sam Mull. I have a podcast called FinTech Insider. You should really look at. But also,
You may have heard of it.
yeah, we're 11FS is a consulting firm based out of London, but we do work globally. We actually build banks for banks. So like Chase has Fin, Wells has Greenhouse. We do that kind of all over the globe. But we have a podcast called FinTech Insider. If you go to iTunes, you'll see it. One thing I really like, and again, if y'all got questions, this is so small, you can definitely ask questions, okay? One thing I always like with founders is finding the background story of why they started a company, because starting a company, you got to be nuts, and you got to be really motivated, and you got to be nuts, and you got to know how to use an iPhone. That's my criteria for doing it. So I love founder stories. So if y'all are okay with that, I want to do that. And Sheena, I'm going to start with you, because I read that you got a Walmart receipt, looked at that, and said I should start a company. Is that a true story?
That's how I started my first company. So
Have
this
you
is my
been to
second company.
CVS? Have you seen that freaking thing that they did?
Yes.
You should start multiple companies.
No, it's way too long.
Yes,
But
it
my
is.
first company I started my first company that way. So
While in college, right?
While in college.
There you go.
So I've never had a corporate job, which apparently, I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but yeah. So I'm from Terry, Mississippi, as I mentioned. Really small town in Mississippi. It's right outside of Jackson, so it's central Mississippi. Grew up in a town where there was only one bank. It was like a little small local bank. Nobody in the town actually banked there though. Everybody actually just used alternative financial services. So people would cash their checks like the grocery store, the convenience store. Like nobody actually used the bank. I'm guessing it was like not friendly or something. I don't know why. But people never banked there. So as I mentioned, like my grandmother keep her money in her house. People would definitely use like payday lenders, check cashing. Mississippi is, I don't know if you know, but Mississippi is number one for poverty. We are the poorest state. My home state is the poorest state in the United States. If you go to Jackson, Mississippi, you will probably find 3 predatory options to every one bank. So you're going to see your pawn shops, your title loans, your payday lenders, your check cashing, and then you might see one bank. So the opportunities and the access is not very great there. Went off to college. I double majored in film and psychology. I did not plan to go into technology at all, actually. And I went to Walmart my senior year of college. I subleased my apartment out that summer. And I ended up having a super long receipt. And I just told my roommate, I was like, this was 2011, by the way. So the App Store is still very young. It was like maybe 200,000 apps in the App Store, where now it's like 5 million. But it was very young. And I was like, I wish there was an app that I could keep all my money and my receipts. I think I was ahead of my time. So, like now you go to like somewhere, they're like, do you want to print your receipt? Do you want to email your receipt or something? See, technically, I was trying to do that in 2011. A little bit ahead of my time.
And you were still in school, right?
And I was still in
Southern
school.
Miss?
Southern Miss.
There you go.
But that was my first app. That company turned into a company called Sheena Allen Apps, which was ended up being a portfolio mobile company around like the media space, so social media apps. That company, I left Mississippi, moved to Silicon Valley. Let me tell you the biggest cultural shock of my life. For a few reasons. I'm from Mississippi, where I come from a predominantly minority community. I saw no black people when I got to Silicon Valley. I was like, where did I just land? It was super expensive. Like peanuts was like $5.
Yeah.
It was like $1 at the dollar store in Terry. But I got there. The good thing is I learned a lot. So I built my first company, bootstrapped it actually. I didn't take money from any investors.
Wait a minute, go back. So that's a big deal. Because you just got a thumbs up from Chris and Andre's
I
like,
bootstrapped,
yes.
and if you can't bootstrap, please bootstrap. Because if not, when you take money from VCs, your baby becomes less of your baby. But I bootstrapped my first company, did really well. We were in the black. Moved from Silicon Valley to Austin, Texas. Austin at the time was like the tech capital of the South. Now Atlanta's actually kind of giving a run for its money. But Built that company. Well, 2016, I went back home to visit, had moved away, and I noticed the people in my community were actually doing the exact same thing I had saw our parents do and our grandparents do, which was now cash their checks at the grocery store and use alternative services. And at the time, 2011, 2012, I'm seeing Uber disrupt taxi. I'm seeing Airbnb disrupt hotels. And in my mind, I'm like, there has to be a way that technology can disrupt this financial market and what like we're having to go through. So 2016, I took the time to actually research this market. We did take money, so FinTech is a really hard industry to bootstrap in just because it takes so much money, so much regulatory, so much.
And can I interrupt just for 1 second? How many of y'all know what FinTech is? Keep throwing that term out. Good. Sometimes you get to look like I have no clue what you're talking about.
So we took money from a group called Power Moves, which is in New Orleans, and then we took money from Liberty Bank, which is your second largest African American owned bank behind United. And we took that money. The biggest thing I wanted to find out with that money was, does everybody like people are in Mississippi, everybody different, what are their reasons, where can we scale this, where's the money, because we're a for-profit company. And that's what we did for all 2016. 2017, we did a pilot. And the biggest thing that came from that was we realized that we had to focus on a younger market, mainly because when you go to someone who's like 60 and they've been like using check cashing all their life, to be like, here's an app, you know, we're gonna help you save all those fees, I'm good. Like we literally met people who they budgeted in their Social Security or their whatever. They already had to put money in there like, oh, I'm gonna have to pay my neighbor $20 already to take me here, and it's gonna cost me $10 to check cash in place. Like literally, like they had already put that in their budget. They've been doing it for years. So we knew we couldn't do, an older audience. We had to do a younger audience. And the biggest thing, like I said, I mentioned earlier, that we saw was the younger audience wanted access to things that you no longer could pay for in cash. And so that's where we found our sweet spot. But the background of that literally came from my ability to, my competitive advantage was I understood the people way more than other people. So even now when I sit down with like the big banks like your Wells and your JP Morgans, they all understand there's a problem. I give them credit, they know there's a problem. They really don't understand the people at all. It's like they're kind of like throwing mud against the wall and hoping that it sticks. And for me, there's really a psychological component to when it comes to financial inclusion that I think a lot of them miss. Well, I know they miss. And so my background led me to be able to understand the people. So building this company came from a different perspective. It came from a different angle than when you see a lot of other companies trying to tackle the unbanked and underbanked market.
So funny enough, I did not grow up in Mississippi, although my accent would make you think I did. I grew up in Detroit, but when I say I grew up in Detroit, I grew up in Detroit, not, 8 Mile, which is a joke, by the way, or 10 Mile. I grew up in Detroit, in the city. Payday loans everywhere, literally good luck finding a bank. Detroit's revitalized a little bit, but good luck even finding, 10 years ago, there wasn't a grocery store chain, a national one, within the city limits of Detroit. There wasn't a Starbucks within the city limits. It's changed. Detroit's seen a comeback. But this isn't a rural thing. This isn't an urban thing. This is an American thing right now. So,
yes.
And I would say
1 in 5 homes actually is unbanked in America right now.
About 25 million Americans is the estimate.
Yeah, 25 million
underbanked, underserved.
Unbanked, about 40 million is underbanked.
Yeah. So those of you trying to come up with a business plan, remember you got to make money too. Okay? So that's why I want to move on to Andre. Now your background's a little bit interesting because you were a lawyer, right? Originally you studied law. You were in the Navy. We were both in the military. So you were an intelligence officer in the military, in the reserves.
Not a very intelligent one, but yeah.
Yeah, that's a running joke in the military. How do you go from studying law to starting an aspiration bank?
Well, not a straight path.
Never is.
Never is. Grew up in some ways in a world diametrically opposed or different than one Sheena described, but in many ways the same world as well. So I grew up not in rural Mississippi, but in Los Angeles. My parents were recent immigrants. And so grew up in a community and in a place where felt many of the same challenges that a lot of recent immigrants were facing economically and so on. So a family that was kind of went from paycheck to no paycheck, and oftentimes on food stamps and public assistance as we were making ends meet, and so grew up really passionate around economic opportunity and economic justice for people. But definitely did not go the business route, frankly. Had almost zero interest in business. Wanted to make an impact in different ways, and so I started my career.
Were you not a speechwriter for Al Gore?
I was.
Yeah, so
yes.
we're going way off the beaten path, by the way, but think about that. I mean, that's early on.
So
right?
I started my career, kind of lucky break, but working in the Clinton White House as a speechwriter, and then a policy advisor for Vice President Gore, and helped run his policy platform operation. And in 2000, did a similar role for John Kerry. In 2004, decided I was bad luck for Democratic presidential candidates who have enough problems without me around, and so for the good of all of us, decided I was going to get out of that business. Had during the Kerry campaign gotten to know a law professor at Harvard, and she and I and another person kind of started putting together this idea for what we were calling then at the time an idea that she had for a financial product safety commission, which eventually became the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and she's now a senator from Massachusetts running for president, Elizabeth Warren. Decided I was going to try to really make more of an impact, not in the public policy world, and so took that law degree that I hadn't used and became a financial fraud prosecutor. So very much on the ground floor, dealing with consumer scams and scams against military families and older Americans. Did that, as Sam said, at some point you have to make money too, and so went and started working as a strategic consultant, and clients ended up being some of the big banks. And saw there that you had actually some really well-meaning people in those institutions, but yet they had a fundamentally broken business model, right? They made money when things were worst for their customers, right? They made money the more overdrafts you had, the more late fees you had. If you're stuck somewhere and you need money out of an ATM that's not your out-of-network ATM, they make money off the people who, as with most people, don't have the monthly minimums to avoid the service charges, which is most people in the country, and that meant there was really a problem of incentives, right? They weren't incented to help people do better. Their financial incentive was to have people do worse, and so as well-meaning as they were, there was a disconnect there, and on the things that I cared about, equality of opportunity. Something like the work I did with Al Gore around climate change way back before anybody was paying attention to that issue whatsoever 20 plus years ago, and so on, that these institutions weren't making things better, but a financial institution could. And that in fact, if you cared about those kinds of issues, if you cared about equality of wealth in our country, if you cared about equality of opportunity, if you cared about saving the planet, you actually needed a financial institution working for everyday people with really massive scale that had those kinds of concerns at its heart. And that was the idea behind aspiration. Sometimes you have these businesses, and when you look at folks in Silicon Valley and other times they'll say, we're in the business of X, but we have this larger mission and so on that may or may not be connected. For us, we probably started the opposite way. At least for me, I started with, okay, here's the mission. Here's what I care about. All right, now let's build a business around that. Mm-hmm. And if we're going to actually make that mission happen, if we're going to actually make a difference, then we have to have a sustainable, profitable business that is able to grow and scale. And so how do we do that in a way that makes that mission come to life and joins our success in making a difference in people's lives as well to the success of the business at the same time and design the business that way, and that's what we've tried to do.
Yeah, I think at a point that was brought up, actually Shana, you brought it up around, it is great if you can bootstrap, right, and not take outside money. We're going to get to Chris, who was a VC at one point. It's okay to take money. I can't say 11FS, which has a podcast called FinTech Insider, is 100% bootstrap, no outside money. It is interesting, and you also have, I know you got some money from Arlen Hamilton,
I did.
if I'm not mistaken. If you don't know who
Backstage.
Arlen Hamilton is, go Google. She's a trip and funny and great. Correct me if I'm wrong, you've had backers that include Orlando Bloom and Leonardo DiCaprio. Go ahead.
That's right.
Yay. Can you get us, got a number?
What's that? Oh, Leo's number?
Yeah.
Yeah, it
Get
was,
on
he
555.
sends his regards.
Okay, yeah, he couldn't come, he got stuck.
No offense
Do
to
you
all
think
of
you
you.
could tell him about the podcast?
get 'em
I'll
on now.
bet, as great as we are, we might have had more people come if he was on the panel.
He's behind
next
the
time
screen.
I'm going to bring him
Oh,
with me.
yeah.
But he got involved. He's been tweeting about us and sharing with us about his however many tens of millions of social media followers. Really because he's a real leader on issues around climate change and the environment, and understands that none of that's going to get better if we're all putting our money in these banks that are, again, turning that money around and lending it to fund these oil pipelines and everything else that's really destroying our planet. But as I was telling him about the company, and he already invested and was kind of showing him a bit of what we were doing, he said, you know what, this is something, I've always dreamed of being able to run a company like this. I said, look, we can trade places just for a week or so. It hasn't happened yet, but I'm still holding out hope.
Well, and Chris has done well too. So by the way, when you're talking about venture money, because you were part of the Google Venture program, Chris and I have absolutely nothing in common. I know you went to Colorado State. Did you grow up in Colorado?
No.
I don't know.
I grew up outside D.C.
Grew up outside, again, nothing in common. However, Chris has done incredibly well. He had a company, I believe he co-founded called Milk, if I got that right, that actually Google came in and acquired.
Yep.
Just a nice thing to have, right? Was part of the Google Venture program, was able to be a VC for a little bit, and then how did the idea of Grove come about from all that?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So if you go like way, way back, I grew up outside DC, kind of like upper middle class family. Probably like I would say like, wasn't like the best. I was like not an idiot, but not academically smart in terms of like following the rules.
So there's hope for somebody.
Yeah,
in
there's
the room.
hope. And so I ended up going to boarding school, which I thought I wanted, and it turns out I loved, but it was funny, my parents missed whatever memo everyone else at boarding school's parents had, which was like, give your kids money. And my parents were like, no, like you can figure it out.
Were you on a meal plan or something?
Yeah, no, I mean, everyone was on the meal plan, but it was funny, this was not in the late 1990s, and so everyone that I grew up around had all this money. And they would take, like, you want to go to downtown and do something? Take a taxi. And I was like, I'm taking a bus. And they'd be like, I'd take a taxi if they were paying. But I was the person like ordering Domino's pizza and selling it by the slice because I needed to eat a piece of pizza, and I found that if I ordered 8 slices, I ordered pizza, I could sell 6 slices and eat 2. And so I've always had this, like, I was surrounded by people that, like, my parents didn't give me a lot of allowance, so I like had to figure it out. And so I always had some weird side hustle, like financial thing, and that just kind of like snowballed over time. In college, I found out that you could get credit card points. So I would pay for every possible thing anyone possibly wanted and rack up points, and then I'd be able to go on a trip, because it turns out if you want to travel somewhere, it costs money also. And I didn't want to spend money. So my whole life, I've kind of been this crazy person that's like, how do you do a bunch of things and not spend any money? And so ended up being fortunate to, joined a few companies, had a great experience, got laid off in 2008, and that kind of shocked me, because I was like, oh my God, I'm glad I saved a little money, because I don't have a job, and a lot of people didn't have a job. And so I started this conference called Laid Off Camp. We did 20 events around the country to help people figure out what to do in the wake of the 2008 crisis. And it was pretty eye-opening to see that most people weren't prepared for it. Most people hadn't saved an emergency fund. And I just kept thinking about that, but I never really knew now was the time to start a company. ended up at Google, spent 4 years investing at Google Ventures and startups, and I'd been fortunate along the way to be a really frugal spender and a really crazy saver. And my wife would tell you if she were on stage that somehow without ever directly saying it, I ended up training her to do the same thing. And so together we're the most crazy optimizer, financial points, save money, everything. And my friends were always asking me for tips, and I was like, oh, just go talk to a financial advisor, go do this. And a person came to me, he's like, no, I tried that. It doesn't work. There's no one I can talk to. Can you just start you as a service? And I was like, what does that even look like? What does me as a service look like? He's like, well, you know how you figured out how to buy a home and you figured out how to save money? He's like, I want to figure that out and I don't know how to do it. And so that's what led me to start this, was I started asking around and I was like, oh, I can't find a service to refer a friend to. The first thing I thought was, oh, great. It's not hard. There's 1,000 books. Literally pick any of 1,000 books about personal finance. No joke, Personal Finance for Dummies, great book. If you can read it cover to cover and actually comprehend it and then start acting, you're fine. You don't need any help. It turns out I couldn't get a single friend to read a single personal finance book cover to cover. And it's unfortunate that something that is the number one cause of stress, the number one cause of divorce, doesn't create enough motivation or inertia in Americans to do anything. I see a hand. I was like, question. I want a question.
Okay.
Yeah. That was my question was going right where you've been, and it's based on the young lady's conversation. When we went back home, we were trying to help people who needed the help. In other words, it was good for them, but not necessarily good to them.
Right.
Okay. And I wanted to ask the panel, you have great ideas, change the world, make it better, all that. But like you say, getting people to actually get the message or get what you're selling, even though it may be good for them or the world or whatever. What kind of, and I want to know individually, what kind of resistance or pushback did you get, and how did you wind up dealing with that?
You just asked a great question that every VC will ask, as the VC up here smiling, is what's your customer acquisition strategy? What's your cost per customer? He's like, yeah, that's tick box number one, right? How are you going to acquire customers, and how are you going to make money? Because this is all great, but not a single person up here is a not-for-profit. So that is let's start with you, Carissa. How do you, you're 3 years in now, right? Yeah. At breakfast, I asked them kind of these same questions. I was like, so how are you doing? I'm guessing that all your customers are in San Francisco. And right away, you're like, no. The majority of your customers are outside of California, which is a wonderful sign of success, by the way.
Yeah, so it's funny. This is the biggest challenge in this industry is you go to someone and you say, hey, your bank's charging you this crazy fee. You should switch banks. And they're like, pretty good. Yeah. You're like, well, don't you like free money? And they're like, yeah. Do you want to give me free money? And you're like, yes, but not as a dollar bill. And they're like, then I'm not interested. So that's our biggest challenge is people, there's this great movie that I'll shamelessly plug a movie coming out in a month called Playing with Fire, and it's all about financial independence. It's a documentary. It's a first documentary on personal finance, feature-length documentary. And it follows a couple going through this crazy experience, which is this movement called FIRE, which is if you evaluate what you care about, you can change your behavior. And if you know that, I want to spend time with my kids and I have to save money to do that, it's enough motivation to change what you do. But until you realize that there's something you care about more than the latte, more than the going out to the dinner, going out to drinks, then it's really hard. And this woman struggled at a part in the movie so hard because she had a nice car, she had a nice job, she got rid of the nice car, she drove around a less nice car, and she was the person interviewed her and they're like, so what do you think of this Honda? And she's like, it's fine. She was used to a different lifestyle, and when you want to prioritize your finances, the best thing to do is lower your standard of living. And you're like, okay, so I'm going to lower what I feel now for something 25 years from now. And we're wired for what can I do to maximize right this second? And immediately, and trying to get people to maximize something 25 years from now is close to impossible. And the one thing that we found that does it is if you can connect that 25 years from now to something that is just so emotionally important. So you turn to somebody and say, what's most important? We start everything with a strategy session, and a financial planner says, hey, what do you care about? Well, and someone's like, my kids. I really care about my kids more than anything in the world. You're like, really? Because if you're going the way you're going to be retired, you're going to have all these healthcare costs, your kids are going to have to pay for it. And like, you are going to be, like, the best gift you could give your children is not having to pay for your life in your retirement, because that's going to put a whole burden on them in their adult years. And you just start to pull on the things that matter most to them in a genuine way. Like, we're not trying to scam them. Like, we generally want them to save money. And when you can connect it to something they want to buy a home. That's been their dream from a child. They want to pay off their student loans. When you can say this thing will specifically connect to this other thing you care about, that you care about more than anything, and you listen to them and you show empathy, like, we actually see that it drives behavior and gets people to be committed to sign up. And then I would say the other thing that seems so counterintuitive is we make people pay a few $100s to get started. And, you know, this sunk cost fallacy of like, once you put money in, you've got to do something. We find that like, once someone's paid a few $100s, we're like, you got to fill out all this information. They're like, yeah, I do, because I just put $200 down. And like, I want to make sure that $200 comes back to me in some way. So those are two things we do to kind of really encourage people to get started, is connect to their goals and like make them put some skin in the game.
So moving to aspiration. So he's not going to brag, so I will. You got over 1 million customers now. All right, growing, I think 100, 200,000 a month, if I remember right. All right. So I'm sorry you have this customer acquisition problem. I don't know how you're going to solve it. So for your case, how do you connect?
Yeah, I think for us, it's really about trust. You know, I think when you look at, you know, this larger world of all of this transformation happening in financial services and intersection of technology, finance and technology, FinTech, and so on, there's a lot of people who are coming up with a cool app that has this feature or that feature, things like that, and all of those things are important. But fundamentally, less than 10% of Americans trust their financial institution. And if you're not solving for that, then I think you're missing the 10,000-pound gorilla in the room. And so that's really where we start is, all right, how do you create a real sense of relationship with customers at a massive scale, right? It's not going to be person to person adding 200,000 people a month, but how do you create a sense of shared values, of shared incentives, and some of the problems I was talking about in the traditional financial industry? How do you flip those on their head? And you know what we find is, look, financial services is intimidating. It's math homework. Nobody likes doing math homework. Some people like doing math homework. Chris is your financial optimizer. He likes doing math homework. But a lot of people don't like doing math homework. A lot of people get intimidated by it. A lot of people feel like the friends that Chris was describing, like this is out of my league. They sit down, they look at their financial situation, and there's all kinds of problems there. There's all kinds of stress there. Even if they were going to forego all the lattes in the world, right? They still were going to have financial challenges, just living paycheck to paycheck, and so number one, how do you make things simple and easy to understand? And number two, how do you build trust so that people feel that we are on the same side of the table? And then number three, how do you get people to think not just about their own financial situation, but think about this larger set of concerns, right? For some people, it's going to be, I care, I want to do something for my children 25 years from now. For other people, it's going to be, I really care about making the world a better place, and I may or may not be willing to switch my bank account to get to have my fees go from $10 a month to $5 a month. But I am willing to take action to have an impact on the causes that are really near and dear to me. And so we see, for instance, most of our customers who come to Aspiration have no investments whatsoever, no wealth building assets, right? Don't own a share of stock, don't own a mutual fund, ETF. 75% have none of that when they first come to Aspiration. Within the first year or so, about 40% will open an investment account with us. they'll start out at, our minimum is $10. And so some people start out there, some people start out a little bit more. About almost 2/3 of them will have monthly recurring investing, right? Average about $100 a month, which is great. That they're putting away and starting to save, and some people will have less, some people will have more, but they're starting to build up that nest egg and doing so at age 25, 30, 35, as opposed to waiting to 45, 55, 65, and that makes all the difference in the world. And I think that's really, again, about these factors, about trust, about simplicity, about shared values. Look, there's zero fee investment products out there. There's low minimum investment products out there. Our products, again, are fossil fuel free, firearm free, invest in companies with really strong what's called ESG factors, environmental, social, diversity, governance factors in these companies that we're investing in. But those products exist out there, but people haven't done it. And I think they're coming to Aspiration doing it because they really feel, okay, this is an institution that I can get behind, and I can believe they're going to be working for what's important to me and my life and my family's life and future, and not just trying to take advantage of me.
So for those of you that are taking notes real quick, I'm going to give Sheena the last word for those of you asking questions because they're flagging me on time. Oh. And I love that y'all are taking notes, by the way, right? So we got authenticity, emotive, right? Empathy is incredibly important. The third, and this is John Hope Bryan thinks, so you know it, community is huge, right? I mean, this whole thing is community. And Sheena, you embrace that concept of community.
Yes.
I've seen that over and over again. Can you briefly talk about that, and then we got to get off the stage. And for those of you that want to ask questions, charge the stage.
Yeah, so I'll be quick. So our main thing is we have a B2C side to us. So if you tell somebody about Capway, they can easily go. But our main strategy is actually B2B2C. We mainly go through other businesses to get to our consumers because when you're trying to do an underserved market, just finance in general, customer acquisition cost is usually very high. And so we find strategies of going through other businesses to lower that cost. So we find ways where they'll need us, and we catch them in ways where they need us. It might be someone younger who needs social currency. So it's a kid who goes off to school for the first time, comes from an underserved home, and he wants to catch an Uber on spring break. He downloads the app and he realizes holy crap, I actually gotta have a card on file, I can't pay cash for this. Or it's working with someone large, using Georgia Power as an example because we're in Atlanta. Georgia Power has shut down almost all of their storefronts. Most people's going to those storefronts and paying for cash. So now what do? Their job is not to find a solution. Their job is to cut down costs. So they're going to shut down storefronts. So how do we work with Georgia Power so now that we can help with their 300,000 people who have to find a way to use technology now because they have to be able to pay for their power. So we mainly go through other businesses. We're more of a B2B2C. And the second thing, very briefly, is we make things very relatable. So we build an ecosystem. It's not just about giving somebody plastic. It's not giving them just a debit card. It's an ecosystem. So part of our ecosystem is financial education. I'll ask someone if we're doing a session, they might have on Jordans, quick example. And I'll say, how much you pay for your J's? Oh, $180. How many shares of Nike could you have bought for those J's? Oh, I can't afford, the stock market's too high. That's for rich people. No, a Nike share is $80. Sometimes it's just pure lack of knowledge, and it's really not their fault. It's lack of opportunity, lack of access to having that knowledge.
They didn't get the memo. Does that sound familiar?
We don't teach it in school.
And we don't teach it in schools, and so we make it very relatable. So whether it's using pop culture, whether it's finding ways to explain, it's nowhere near your textbook financial literacy because nobody cares about that. That's very boring. It's not relatable. So if we got to use 21 Savage saying that he doesn't wear jewelry because he met wealthy people who don't wear it because it depreciates, we'll use that. We got to talk about Nikes and how you can buy shares. We'll use that. So we make it super relatable and we build an ecosystem. So it's the debit card, but it's financial education with that debit card. Next year we're going to start doing micro lending because your average 20-year-old needs $200. Maybe his mom can't give it to him. He's not going to walk in your average community bank and ask for $200, but he's already on our platform. How do we stop the next generation from having to go into a payday lender or check cashing? So it's mainly our B2B2C, but also build an ecosystem where we keep them in-house and not having to go outside to anything that's going to hurt them in the long run.
So here you go. You got Capway. Y'all know how to Google. All right. App Store, Capway, Aspiration Bank, Grow Financial. Read my T-shirt. We're about to get off the stage so we can keep this flowing. Great chance to grab folks and talk to them that doing this at scale and have achieved success. All right, thank you all very much. We appreciate the time. Thanks, guys.